of infant mortality, and also in terms of dying while trying to give birth or having children. In addition to that, black men are disproportionately sectioned and overloaded with drugs, rather than, as the lady who spoke earlier said, given therapeutic treatment. I don't know why this is. I'm sure that it's a cultural thing. Women like me are seen as aggressive, apparently, angry black women, but we're not, we're just passionate. Conference, please support this reference back. Thank you.
Excellent and perfectly timed as well. Final person moving.
Jacob Rom-Garina, Guildford CLP Youth Officer. First-time delegate and first-time speaker. Earlier this year, a very close family friend of mine, someone I'd known since I was 3 years old, took her life due to suicide. Not because she wasn't looking for help. She'd exhausted every possible opportunity, but she couldn't find it. What we need is funding so that people who need help can get it. Conference, please join me in supporting this.
Thank you very much. So now I'd like to welcome our Shadow Cabinet Minister for Mental Health, Dr. Rosanna Allen-Carr.
Good morning, Conference. And hasn't it been a fantastic week? I'm so proud to be part of the Labour team, a team with one goal: getting Labour back into office. There are so many reasons why we must end this long, dark night of Tory rule. And the nation's mental health is top of my list. Under the Tories' 12 years of mismanagement, there are 1.6 million people waiting for mental health treatment. That's more than the entire populations of Birmingham and Liverpool put together. Waiting times are soaring, and far too often help depends on your postcode, not your need. And children are being let down. Referrals for children and young people with eating disorders have doubled, and referrals for children who are self-harming have tripled, and children are waiting days in A&E in crisis. In the A&E where I work, I see it. My colleagues across the country, they see it. The Tories have cut a quarter of mental health beds, and it is our communities who are suffering. An entire generation is being failed by this Conservative government. This mental health crisis is wrecking the British economy. Last year, 18 million workdays were lost to mental illness. More than industrial disputes, more than injuries. It costs the UK economy at least £117 billion a year. And who does the cost of living crisis hit the hardest? Those already living with mental illnesses. Do you remember Thatcher's Britain? One of being cold in your own home, with the perpetual fear of debt and disconnection? That should have been consigned to the history books. I remember all too well my brother, Mum and me gathered around the only heater for moments of relief from that gnawing, biting cold that saps your energy and robs you of your concentration. And I listened to my mum awake at night, worrying how to keep us safe and warm. This was the 1980s, How are we here again now? I am proud to be an NHS doctor. Thank you. And I'm also proud to be a socialist. Working in A&E, I approach a patient from the point of view of their health needs. But I know that we cannot divorce the person from their social class, gender, race, and background. The gig economy, soaring bills, rising crime, a brittle and divided society, a broken social media brimming with hate for millions. Modern life means poor mental health. And if ever there was an argument that prevention is better than cure, it is with mental health. We know that the longer mental illnesses are left untreated, the harder and more costly they are to treat. I met the fantastic team at Paul's Place here in Liverpool on Monday. They show how communities support one another after suicide. Their stories are raw, moving, but their work is filled with hope and love. Conference, if there is one word to sum up Labour's mental health policy, it is this: prevention. The next Labour government will guarantee NHS health support, mental health support, within a month. And when I say support, I mean treatment, not just an assessment of need. We will improve services. We will improve service quality for patients. We will recruit more mental health staff, starting with 8,500 new staff by the end of our first term in office. We will place specialist mental health support in every school. We will establish mental health hubs for young people in every community, open to under 25s with no need for referral. Yes. And finally, we will guarantee a fair share of funding for mental health. We will not abandon those in crisis. Whenever I meet patients and staff all over the country, people ask me the same thing. What practical difference will Labour's pledges make to me? It's a good question, but Conference, here's the answer. Our resolute commitment to prevention, early intervention, and timely treatment will make the difference. I'll never forget the sight of a father with an ashen face being brought into A&E in a wheelchair with his teenage daughter on his lap. She was covered in cuts and her body emaciated. How is it fair that in Tory Britain, parents have to give up work to be on suicide watch because they cannot access timely CAMHS support? Sadly, I've met many such parents, and their faces will never leave me. This is why it is vital that children can see someone without bureaucracy, judgment, or red tape. And our new mental health hubs will make a difference. Labour will make the difference. And what a contrast to Tory indifference! Conference, in her 10 years as a government minister, do you know how many major policy speeches Liz Truss has made on mental health? Not one. Her reckless mini-budget has left people terrified. Terrified of what's to come this winter. Terrified of how to support their families. Terrified for their futures. Liz, you can't skip the blame for Britain's mental health crisis. For those of us who work shifts on the NHS frontline, the length of waiting lists comes as no surprise. It's what happens after over a decade of Tory decision-making. Conference, Labour will transform our mental health services. New staff, new services, faster treatment, prevention as our watchwords, better mental health for all. Conference, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Rosanna. Thank you, Conference. I'm not Alice Perry, I'm Mark Ferguson, but please do bear with me. We now move to our motions listed from page 10 of the CAC report. We start with Composite 15, moved by the Socialist Health Association and seconded by Lewisham Deptford CLP. Do we have the mover and seconder?
Hello again. As I said previously, I'm a GP for many years in Hackney in East London, and I'm a public governor of the Homerton Hospital. As Rosina and Wes have said, the NHS is not failing. It has been deliberately failed for 12 years of Conservative mismanagement, underfunding and corruption, which risks lives and puts staff under enormous pressure. Rebuilding the NHS on the Bevan principles of a universal, comprehensive, publicly provided service will restore trust and faith that the NHS is there for each of us. This will put Labour in a strong position to win the next general election. These years of cutbacks and privatisation go along with a market in the NHS. The NHS remains free at the point of use, but private companies operate behind the NHS brand to gain kudos while siphoning off public money for profit. The most glaring example of this was the so-called NHS Test and Trace, which was completely private, hugely expensive, ineffective, and cost thousands of lives while enriching Tory party donors. The Bevan model of universal healthcare is cost-effective and equitable, as the profit motive is removed from planning and delivering services. In July, the Health and Care Act was passed. The NHS is no longer a national health service, but fragmented into 42 separate integrated care systems. This is a model with public-private businesses copying the American system. Healthcare is decided by finances available and not clinical need. Each area has a capped budget, which allows the private sector to fill gaps when the NHS is cut back and patients are denied care. Using the private sector more will not bring down waiting lists. The private sector is already deeply embedded in the NHS, and this has not helped waiting times. The private sector has a limited capacity to expand and depends on poaching staff from the NHS. What we need now is emergency funding, more staff with better pay and unionised jobs, reopening closed NHS beds and theatres, and permanently build up NHS capacity to deal with the backlog. So to secure healthcare for all, free at the point of use, we call on the front bench, which aren't there anymore, to repeal the 2012 Lansley Act and the 2022 Health and Care Act, reverse and eliminate integrated care systems, to avoid any hint of Tory sleaze. Labour MPs must not accept donations from corporate health lobbyists. And we must bring in legislation for a universal, comprehensive NHS which is publicly funded, publicly accountable and publicly provided. Please support this motion so we can get into government at the next election. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Delegate. And can I have the seconder, please?
Good morning, Conference. My name is Louise Irvin from Lewisham Deptford CLP. I'm a first-time delegate and first-time speaker. I'm Secretary of Doctors in Unite and a member of Keep Our NHS Public. Conference. As a GP for 30 years, it breaks my heart to see the suffering of patients as they wait in pain and anxiety for the care they need, whether for hospital, GP or mental health services, and the anguish of NHS staff trying to deliver good care with diminishing resources, all made worse by this government's grotesque mismanagement of the COVID pandemic response and its neglect of public health throughout 12 years of austerity. I dread the coming winter. Increasing poverty, cold and hunger will cause more illness and suffering and push the NHS beyond breaking point. This is a life and death issue. It is the result of 12 years of Tory underfunding, understaffing, and in England, a process of privatisation that has fragmented services and squandered resources on the market and private profits, as we saw during COVID. But it doesn't have to be this way. I was a GP under Thatcher's government and well remember the awful NHS crisis then. Patients lying for hours on hospital trolleys and year-long waits for hospital appointments. Sound familiar? And I vividly recall the difference the Labour government made when it came to power. Labour's massive investment in the NHS was transformational, dramatically improving patient care and outcomes. Labour could do this again, rescue the NHS and social care and transform them into great public services. This will need three things: adequate funding, adequate staffing with more training places and decent pay, and an end to privatisation, replacing the deeply flawed integrated care systems with truly integrated health and social care services, publicly owned and publicly provided. Labour can win the next election with such a vision. It would be immensely popular, save lives, improve everyone's well-being. Practically, morally, economically, it's the right thing to do. Conference, please support this motion wholeheartedly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now can I call Composite 16, moved by Bristol South CLP and seconded by Bristol West CLP.
Joanne Kay, Bristol South, moving Composite 16, first-time delegate and first-time speaker. Conference in 1997, while pregnant with twins and advised to be on bed rest, I ignored medical advice on May the 1st to get out of bed and walk, waddle the streets to get the vote out for Labour. I put my toddler son in his pushchair and I took him with me that day to vote Labour. And then I went back to bed to watch the results and spent that fantastic night watching a new dawn break and feeling hope for the first time in so many years. As a new mother of three, that Labour government had my back. It didn't see children as commodities of parents, which they could either afford or shouldn't have. They didn't see childcare as something women use not to be able to work long hours. That government knew that if you want a successful economy, you need women to be able to work, and you need children to be well cared for by qualified and professional staff. They knew that far from being commodities, children who are well cared for and are in childcare that links into our nursery and primary education, those children do better, those children thrive, and they're more likely to become the skilled workers of the future that our economy will always need. From working tax credits, Sure Start centres, the above-inflation rises in child benefit and the introduction of free nursery places, that government gave a strong message to me that it was on my side, that my children's care and education mattered not just to me as a parent, but to society and the economy as a whole. This motion calls on the next Labour government to place childcare back where it belongs, as part of our economic strategy, ensuring that all parents have access to quality, affordable childcare, which helps their child to develop and grow, and allows those parents to work and make sure we don't lose the skills of parents just because childcare is too expensive. This won't only make the lives of parents less stressful, but it will make our economy stronger and reduce child poverty. This strategy also needs to recognise the often overlooked fact that care work, whether for children or the elderly, is every bit as important to the economy as the skills such as engineering and green energy and conference. Those jobs should be paid just as well. Conference, like most parents, I wanted a better world for my children than I had. And this vicious government have taken that away from them. Those twin babies that waddled around with me on May the 1st are now 25-year-old women and Labour Party members. And if they become parents, I want them to feel that Labour government has their back too. But most of all, Conference, what I want for them is a night like May the 1st. They'll be out on those streets, getting the vote out for Labour, and after this week, I feel we are so much closer to that new dawn of hope. Conference, I move.
Delegate, next delegate.
Good morning, Conference, and first of all, let me say what a lot of hope Keir Starmer and his shadow cabinet colleagues are giving us this week. I feel really inspired by it. That's why I'm here. Like Joe, first-time speaker, but think of this as a Bristol duet between Bristol South and Bristol East, and I hope you like it. As Rachel Reeves, Labour's knowledgeable and highly competent Shadow Chancellor, unlike others we could mention. Anyway, as Rachel said earlier this week, Labour is the party of social justice and economic responsibility. This motion hits the target for both of these. It increases capacity within the UK workforce across the piece. It makes families better off. It will allow parents, especially single parents, who are mainly, of course, not entirely women, as we all know, but mainly women, to develop their potential within the employment of this nation and to reach their true potential via employment and training opportunities. Good childcare, free at the point of need, not only delivers better outcomes for children, but should ensure that families aren't struggling in the absolutely desperate way they are now. And Conference, how necessary is this with the pound tanking and bankers supported by this kamikaze budget? It's outrageous, the state of the country at the moment, and I know that, like you, I feel so absolutely livid about it and want to do something about it. One final point, if I may, Chair. Vacancies across the entire care sector are high and increasing. Our NHS, adult social care workforce, as well as the childcare workforce for which we're speaking, are seriously underpaid, causing severe workforce shortages. They can't afford to stay in these vital jobs. The low status and low pay that they experience does need changing. And again, I have to say, I'm delighted to hear Wes, Rosina and the others to follow absolutely say they are the cavalry, and I'm saying we're the foot soldiers. We can't wait. Come over the hill and help us do it. Thank you, Conference. Thank you.
And so now the final motion is our emergency motion on early years and childcare, moved by the Socialist Education Association and Liverpool Riverside CLP. And while we're waiting for them to come on, I'm just reminding people that when we have the policy debate, if you've already spoken, please don't put your hands up and let other people speak.
Carmen Peruga, SCA and Unite member.
Conference, there are 4 million children living in poverty in the 5th richest country in the world. At least 30% of them are in working households, and the looming cost of living crisis could potentially double it. Teachers and support staff are key workers that looked after all of our children during the pandemic and safeguarded SEND and the most vulnerable children of this country. Hope is what is needed to keep our children engaged in their learning, and hungry children either disengage or disrupt the classroom. Currently, there are children who don't have food in their lunchboxes pretending to eat. This is totally unacceptable. Do we think that parents are going to tell their children this Christmas that it's cancelled? No, they'll turn to loan sharks. Friday's budget confirmed what we already know. The Tories will leave our poorest children to starve this winter. Enough really is enough. No Child Left Behind campaign, launched by the NEU and the Mirror newspaper, will ensure that all children receive a hot, nutritious meal every day. 93,000 children have fallen off roll since the pandemic. The right to food will encourage them back, and it will prevent the rise of health inequalities in the future. The Good Childhood Report 22 shows that our 14 to 16-year-olds have the worst well-being scores ever. As behaviour support staff in schools, we know how bad it is because we work with these children every day. Well-being amongst staff in schools is at breaking point, and this winter we know that we will see the real aftershock of the pandemic. SEA asked Conference to back the campaign in England and make it a reality. It is already being rolled out in Scotland and Wales. One Labour London borough described free schools meals for all as a lifeline, and in a survey in the NEU, 72% of members called for free school meals provision as a solution to tackle child poverty. Labour's COVID recovery plan for schools is still in need. We need a large injection of cash to help educational recovery and respond to children's mental health issues. There is now a teacher recruitment crisis, with only half of the teacher training places being taken up, and 30% of current staff are thinking of leaving the profession. Unions are rightly balloting for action after 10 years of a 20% decline in pay. The danger is that the Tories will agree a rise and leave schools to fund it from existing budgets. This will mean job cuts, larger classes and a further increase in workload. Conference, we need to stand with striking workers and build a world of social justice and hope. We must show our children and our grandchildren that the Labour and trade union movement they learn about in their history books is alive, stronger and compassionate towards them. We heard yesterday children are killing each other. We must bring back statutory youth provision. I'm a youth worker by trade. 2 more minutes. Free school meals are a way of ensuring that our children receive nutritious hot meals every day and gives hope that we care. We need free school meals for all to ensure no child gets left behind. Conference, I move.
Thank you very much, Delegate.
Thank you. My name's Najra Elliott from Liverpool Riverside CLP, first-time delegate and first-time speaker. I'm proud to be seconding this motion on behalf of my CLP, Liverpool Riverside, based in the best city in the world, but also a city that has long suffered under the sharp heel of the Tory boot. From Thatcher's devastating policies of managed decline in the 80s when I was growing up, to the austerity policies of the last decade that have crippled our public services. We're a city that has faced a lot of adversity. We have some of the most deprived wards in the entire country, but we are a proud city and a proud people, and we will always fight back. Last week, we saw a budget delivered by the rich for the rich. As with Thatcher in the 80s, they are still waging a class war against us. Tax cuts for the billionaires, record profits for energy giants, and nothing for the rest of us. We are now facing the worst plummet in living standards for 100 years. Every single day, we're seeing headlines about that people in this country, the 5th richest country in the world, will die from cold and hunger this winter. In Liverpool Riverside, before the cost of living crisis, 11 children in a class of 30 were already living in poverty. And after 2 years of the pandemic, which has widened the already gaping inequalities in educational attainment, levels of child poverty are rising rapidly. These children are now facing the hardest winter of their lives. In my own daughter's school, Liverpool Primary, just up the road from here, they have food banks. If these children are to have a bright future where they can escape the dismal cycle of poverty that they're trapped in, we have to act and act now. We risk losing a generation to the twin evils of freezing and starving in the coming months. The No Child Left Behind campaign by the National Education Union and the Mirror has brought together over 100 civil society organisations to call for universal free school meals for primary school children. I hope the Labour Party can get behind these calls today, but hunger doesn't stop at 11, and being singled out for free school meals while at secondary school only gets stronger. We have security tags being put on nappies and baby formulas. We know that children living in poverty can no longer afford to wait for us to take action. The Labour Party must take the fight to the Tories to make sure that no child goes hungry and that no child is left behind. Conference, please support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So now I'm going to call for contributions from the floor. And if everyone keeps to time, we can take as many people as possible. I know a lot of people do want to speak, so I am going, and I'm going to try and go all around the room as well. So first I'm going to go to the delegate there in the white shirt and the red jacket. It doesn't help you're all wearing red to identify you, but yes, that's you. I'm also going to take the delegate, I'm going to take, delegate at the front there in the green, delegate in the khaki jacket and black vest and the turquoise bangle, very nice bangle. Yeah, I'm going to take the delegate with, in the unison delegation with the red tie and the white shirt. Like I say, you're all wearing red ties, so it doesn't make it easier. And then I'm going to take someone from, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to take you with the nice yellow, is that scarf or jumper? I like it. And then one more, and then we're going to come back round and do some more. I'm going to take the woman in the black jacket and the floral dress as well. Of the two women in red jackets. I called her. Yep. It's at my discretion who to pick across the hall, but I am going to get in as many people as possible from across the hall. This is all, so first of all, it's always a frustrating thing at conference. People do want to get called. There's more delegates wanting to be called than can be called. But if we're all concise, let's get as many people speaking as possible. Over to you, delegate.
Chair, Conference, Leslie Mansell, Lead Rep for Unite the Union in an acute hospital. Thank you all for the support you give the NHS. It matters so much for staff. They're demoralised, dejected, but not defeated. The Tories set us impossible targets, and the NHS needs a lot of fixing. I agree with Rachel on reforming institutions. We must stop our cash being sucked into tax havens. Otherwise, we can't fund the NHS and the public sector properly. I agree with Angela about the need for insourcing. We are fighting privatisation all the time. Unite recently defeated another privatisation of our estates team. Beware, because private insurance companies will want to feel your purse before they feel your pulse. Making profit, not delivering services or supporting good jobs. It's great to hear about thousands of new nurses. We are losing our experienced staff in droves, and there's no bursaries for training. Maternity last week, the situation was so dire, patients were crying, nurses were crying, and community midwives can't afford the petrol costs. You can delay a hip operation, but you can't delay a baby being born. We all have a duty to act. Our public services may never recover. Unite members in public services have successfully taken unprecedented strike action across Northern Ireland and Scotland, and won. We may not be far behind in England and Wales. We need pay justice for our public sector workers, support the NHS fight for survival, and support the motion. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Conference. Elaine Daly, representing my union, GMB. Speaking in support of Composite 15. Upon founding our NHS, Labour's Naib Evans said, "This is not an orthodox government, and I am not an orthodox Minister of Health." The orthodoxy that Bevan was talking about was inequality, forcing illness on working people and putting good health care out of their reach. That is what happens when the Tories put private greed before public need in our economy. Conference. More than 1,000 ambulances have been called out to Amazon warehouses in 5 years. Our members face a dangerous and dehumanising place of work every day. Meanwhile, Amazon were handed £660 million worth of public contracts under Tory governments. Conference. We should not award public contracts to corporations who would rather spend money sending their CEOs on a rocket to space than to keep their workers safe. Decades of outsourcing and PFI contracts in hospitals has pushed our NHS into private hands. In the 5 years to 2019, private firms were handed almost £15 billion in NHS contracts. That has not resulted in better services or a better place to work for our members in the NHS. Essential staff keeping our hospitals running are having to rely on food bank donations to make ends meet. This is Tory orthodoxy, but Labour can break it for good by returning our NHS to its founding principles, publicly provided, free at the point of use, from cradle to grave. The union movement fought for that universal service, just as our late President, Mary Turner, fought all her life for universal free school meals. We need to fight for both again. Please support Composite 15 and the emergency motion. Thank you.
Mary Turner would definitely be very proud of this debate. Next delegate, please.
Hi Conference, Charlie Rowley, Salford and Eccles CLP, proud to be a Unite member as well, and first-time speaker. So, thank you. So supporting all the motions this morning, but speaking in support of Composite 14 on health. So we all know in this room, any Tory government will prioritise the wealth of a tiny few over the living standards, no, over the lives of the rest of us. We've cycled through Tory leader after Tory leader after Tory leader after Tory leader, and it goes on. But it's not just one of them. This is a fight against a party who represents, using the words of my own wonderful MP, Rebecca Long-Bailey, an era of bandit capitalism. Thank you. We've seen this banditry, not just through that horrific budget we saw last week, but through a constant barrage of funding cuts and blame game tactics against public services, later all too often to justify privatisation, increased outsourcing or erosion of workers' rights. We all know someone waiting months for an operation. We are waiting months for a mental health assessment, waiting for a GP or a dentist appointment. And we all have amazing, inspiring people in our lives, hi, I'm Kaz, who works in health or care sectors, who've been battered by the pandemic and by the cuts and battered by what they've witnessed. And we've had some fantastic motions and policy promises this week. I'm so happy to see we'll support funding the mental health hubs. And I'm very hopeful we'll pass this motion today. But while we'll be in power soon, because we must be, we need to be, we aren't yet. And until then, we must support our health and care workers. We must be on the pickets with our nurses and others in upcoming action, because we know this government will demonise and blame them. They won't take the blame themselves, and we must not let that happen. So solidarity with those NHS support workers protesting at Salford Rural this week. Please support this motion, and please take a flask of tea down to your local pickets this winter, because we know there's going to be a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, go and talk to the speaker's desk, please. Well, I don't know, I'm not even sure. Oh, yeah, no, I definitely called her, yeah. The pass will determine whether she's got speaking rights, but maybe if you just take to the speaker's desk, we'll check, because I would like her to speak if she can.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks very much, Chair. Gordon Mackay, Unison, the Union for Public Sector Workers. Conference, as an NHS nurse vaccinating against COVID, I've seen our NHS at its best. Public service and pulling together what our party's built on. I've also seen what the Tory party is built on, greed and disregard for life. Unison members in health and social care, when COVID was tearing the breath from people, told to cut up duvet covers to use as masks or to bring in washing up gloves as barrier protection. Government guidance that masks weren't required unless patients were suspected of having COVID, although the condition would become symptomatic in a matter of hours. In the words of the Surrey coroner, it was difficult to comprehend this policy. Conference, we know why it happened. Government's unprepared, no PPE available, or that buying of it would have eaten into profits. The result was 2,500 NHS workers dead from COVID. We then had a mad scramble not to provide PPE, but to make money out of PPE. £12 billion handed out in 6 months by a Tory government to political friends who had never made PPE. Face masks with rotten elastic, goggles that didn't fit, and equipment that didn't exist. Shameless profiteering. Conference, it was a war against COVID, and NHS and social care staff were sent into the front line with no defences and no weapons. Conference, Unison, no Labour are the party of the NHS, and we'll work with our party to ensure a Labour government protect the health workers that protect us and to give NHS workers a decent and fair pay rise. Conference, our economy will be better with Labour, our NHS will be better with Labour, and our country will be better with Labour. Thanks very much.
Next delegate.
Joan Evian, Southend West CLP, Unison member and proud wearer of my NHS Thank You badge, although I'd rather you stop cutting my pay. So I'm sorry that I'm a second-time speaker, but it's something really passionate to me, and it's taken me 30 years to get onto this stage. So I hope you bear with me. Conference, since the pandemic, we've seen a 20% decrease in GPs, yet we have an unmet need of 10 million people during the pandemic. And the government best estimate is that 5 million are now coming forward to address their care needs. We have an ageing population with more complex needs, a mental health crisis, an eating disorder crisis in my town, and not enough trained staff or treatment places to deal with it. In Southend, we have 4 care homes that closed post-pandemic and a shortfall of 20 whole-time equivalents in A&E in the front-end service, and a government who stopped the additional discharge funding in April despite COVID still hitting our hospital. Whether it's Brexit or cutting of student bursaries or cutting of GP training places or GPs and midwives placed during their 12 years, it's a political choice made by the Conservatives over their last 12 years. When my local new Tory MP wanted to know why we had delays in discharges, I had to remind her of the disastrous Tory policies which contributed to 100,000 vacancies we see in health and social care today. I say it was a political choice and her government's fault. She says, oh no it isn't. Well, conference, I think we know the answer to that. Oh yes it is. Thank you. Support Composite 15.
Delegate. Okay, next delegate.
Hello, conference. I know who I am, but the machine didn't know who I was. Okay. I'm Linda Emanuel. I'm from Camberwell and Peckham CLP, first-time delegate and first-time speaker. Conference Labour are on their way to a victory in 2024. Or, yes, 2024. Now, I commend Labour's commitment to funding the mental health of the nation. But we will all get nowhere unless we look at the issue of bullying that needs to be addressed. Because those of us who have been bullied in our lifetimes know the devastating effects that bullying can have on our mental health. So with Labour dealing with mental health, we have to have processes for dealing with bullying also, in all its forms. Familial, in the workplace, in the media and social media, newspapers, that will go a long way to us all dealing with the increasing levels of mental illness. And we can do that by taking personal responsibility for how we treat each other. We will pave the way towards reducing this mental health crisis that has increased exponentially in the last 12 years with the help of this most monstrous government that we're all living under right now. Thank you, conference.
Okay, so I'm going to take another round. I'm going to try and take more CLP speakers as well. Although I'm saying we're in Liverpool and it's her CLP, so I'm going to take Kim Johnson. I'm also going to take in the lovely gold necklace with the black top there, and then I'm going to take, sorry, I'm just trying to see like further back. There's a delegate in a red cardigan over there. I'm going to take someone from, which bit's the West Midlands? There you go. Okay, in the West Midlands, I will take the person in the grey jacket there, that's just there, you. And then I'm going to take, where's Wales? Wales, okay. And so in Wales, I'm going to take the delegate right at the very back, because you're right at the very back with the white hair. Oh, you're not Wales? Oh, I'm sorry. Well, come anyway. And in Wales, I'll take... is there a woman from Wales that wants to speak? I'll take the delegate with... Are you wearing glasses? Or is it just my eyesight? With the watch and the black jacket? Yeah, you. And then I will also take... Okay. I know everyone's excited, and we're probably running out of time for policy speakers. So I'm going to probably take one more person, but like, please don't shout, because it doesn't really help. Yorkshire. Like, I'm going to take in the blue with the grey with your hand up, and the, yep, you. And we'll see if we've got any more time. Please, everyone, be concise. We might be able to take more speakers, but I can't promise. Okay.
Just hear Yorkshire, I thought it would probably be very popular.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Conference. Kim Johnson, very proud MP for Liverpool Riverside, and I hope you have had a great time in the greatest city in the world. Conference, we know that the past 12 years of austerity has had a major impact on our most disadvantaged communities and our public sector. We know that 4 million children are now living in poverty, and the majority of those are in work poverty. So this is one of the reasons that we are calling for universal free school meals. We're hearing desperate stories from teachers talking about how children are eating rubbers or standing in the playground scared not to be seen not eating. This is something about, and we know that nothing to help our most disadvantaged communities, and particularly our starving children, because that's what's happening at the moment. Our children are starving. They don't have enough food in their bellies to make sure they can learn in school at the moment. So, Conference, what I will say to you, has there ever been a time when we ask the question, can we leave children to starve? As a mother, as a grandmother, as a trade unionist, I will say to you, and I'm sure everybody in this room will say, we can't allow our children to starve. We must call on the National Education Union and support the No Child Left Behind campaign to urgently roll out universal free school meals for all children, initially primary, but then move into secondary. Enough is enough. No more starving children. Thank you, Conference. Support the composite.
Chair, Conference, Jane Jones, Usdaw, speaking in support of the motion on childcare. Conference, as a retail worker, I've seen firsthand how difficult it is for really low paid women in the workplace, struggling to make ends meet, struggling to feed their families, and struggling to manage childcare needs. We all know childcare is extremely expensive. It's a big stretch for most parents. But for the lowest paid workers, it's not just a stretch, it's entirely beyond their reach. The lack of affordable, flexible childcare is holding women back. Many retail workers are on short hours contracts. In this cost of living crisis, they desperately need to work extra hours just to pay their bills. But the high cost and low availability of childcare means it just simply isn't possible for them. Conference, our members don't work 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. They're expected to work flexible, and their hours change from week to week. There are very few options available to them. As a result, many of them rely on patchwork, informal care. Many drop out of the workforce entirely, and many more miss out on opportunities to progress. Conference, it's absolutely right that this motion puts childcare at the heart of our country's infrastructure. It's an absolute right to prioritise childcare to support childcare workers. And it is absolutely right to support all low-paid workers to support their families. Only a Labour government will be on the side of our members and on the side of working families and on the side of the children. So together we will win a Labour government. We will make Keir Starmer our next Prime Minister, and we will make Bridget Phillipson the Education Secretary, who will reform our childcare system and make it fit for the 21st century. Thank you.
Conference. Alison Cornell, Crawley CLP. First time speaker. Sounds a bit like being on James O'Brien or something. It is not possible to overstate the value of good early years support. The Sure Start programme was one of the last Labour government's crowning achievements. Originally focused on more deprived areas, it was soon rolled out as a fairly universal offer because it was of universal value. It made a difference to thousands of children and their families. It was levelling up in action, because that's what Labour governments do. We level policy decision. Since 2010 and Tory austerity, Sure Start centres across the UK have been defunded and closed, with many excellent staff losing their jobs. When I became a county councillor last year, we immediately faced a redesign of early years provision in West Sussex. After years of defunding, footfall was down in many of our centres. If nothing's going on, no one's going. So plans were underway to close 32 out of 43 centres across the county. And I'm appalled to say that's what happened. Many of you will be familiar with Noam Chomsky's view on defunding as a route to privatisation. And if you're not, I suggest you look it up. Because up and down this country, children's early years provisions are being redesigned into hubs, a model that is in common use by American healthcare giants. Now, call me cynical, but I think there's a very good reason for that. In June 21, the London School of Economics research report, Big Change Starts Small, was launched by the then Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. It looked at early years support and concluded that the now inadequate support available is costing the UK more than £16 billion a year. That is £16 billion worth of failure and preventative damage to children. If you don't care about the human cost, and I know that people in this room do, but if you don't, you ought to care about the money. The unravelling of Sure Start is already costing us all dear. The value of the work that our early years staff do is incredible and needs urgently to be recognised. That is why we need a Labour government. Labour governments are all about levelling up, not trickling down. Conference, support Composite 16, then go home and do all that you can to ensure that Keir Starmer becomes the next Prime Minister of this country, because that's what we need.
Good morning, Conference. Harry Davis, Delegate for Coventry North West, first-time delegate, first-time speaker. Thank you very much. I come today to support the emergency motion on education. I speak today from a unique perspective, both as the son of a teacher and from someone who is still in school education. I am 17 years old. I was part of the way, thank you. I was part of the way through my first year in education when the Tories came in. My mum is a teacher. She has been for 26 years, but she would kill me if I'd know that she doesn't look old enough. The education system in this country is on its knees. Teenage mental health is at its lowest, especially in the wake of COVID. I do not know a single person in my year who hasn't struggled. And there is no funding to help us. Suicidal teenagers are being asked to wait over a year for support and then being told to have a bath or go for a walk. Because of this government, children are going to school hungry, teachers are paying for equipment out of their own pockets, SEN students are languishing in state schools, not able to support them because there is just no money. But there is money, Conference. There is money for the wealthiest 1%, there is money to waste on fraud and dodgy PPE, but there isn't money to support me, my friends, the children in my mum's class and my mum. Teachers like her up and down this country are considering leaving the job they have dedicated their lives to. I mean with all sincerity when I say that this country, and especially its young people, cannot survive any more of this government. Labour is coming. We need Bridget Phillipson as Education Secretary. We need a Labour government for me and for young people. Support the emergency motion. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Conference. Anita Okunde, Northwest Young Labour BAME Rep, activist and youth delegate for Rochdale CLP. When I'm not being angry at government, I'm a student who has received 7 years' worth of free school meals. I'm here before you as a long-term benefit of free school meals and breakfast clubs. As a secondary school student, I showed up outside my school at 7 a.m. to revise, and I knew I could get some breakfast from the canteen and be able to concentrate, and a warm meal at lunch to sustain me while I stayed till 5 p.m. at school. Now, this Sunday, I'll be attending Oxford University, the first from my secondary school. The first from my secondary school and one of very few from Rochdale. None of these grades or motivation would have been possible without free school meals I received and the support given by my family and school in order to believe that I could do everything I wanted. I shouldn't be the exception. This should be the standard for young people across the country. I've seen power of young people who are willing to create change, but we are tired of broken promises and a government who ignores our needs and puts us last. And also, we'd be a lot more impactful on a full stomach. And so I urge you all to support this emergency motion. Thank you.
Next delegate.
Millie May Rubin, first-time delegate and youth officer for Leeds East. I'm urging you all to support Composite 15. I'm soon to start studying to be a nurse in our wonderful NHS. I'm doing this because thanks to the incredible mental health nurses, I am finally in recovery for bulimia. Their careless care and support meant I was able to complete my education and carry on with my life. I'm lucky, but there are still so many young people who aren't. They're not getting the treatment they deserve, with the waiting list for CAMS just too long, sometimes being too late, and they're already being adults. The inequalities faced in healthcare for working class families are detrimental to young people's development, socially and physically. So if we don't protect our NHS from this Tory corruption, then the future for the working class is bleak. But with a Labour government, I know we will be able to support the many young people like me that rely on this NHS so much. Thank you.
Conference, my name is Emma Foodie. I'm from the Cooperative Party and this is my first time speaking at conference. Conference, many of you will have watched with pride the programme Ambulance on the BBC in recent weeks. Watching brave paramedics, call handlers and dispatchers work with professionalism and compassion as they help those across the North East in their hardest moments. Providing relatives with guidance on how to do CPR to loved ones, reassurance in mental health crisis, or talking them through the birth of a baby. Conference, they say it all. I used to be one of those call handlers for the North East Ambulance Service, and I am incredibly proud to say that these are my former colleagues. But I'm angered. I'm angered to say that the starting salary for those staff is still basically the same as when I joined the service a decade ago. And that tells you all you need to know about public services in Britain today and the value that this government places on them. A government that clapped for our key workers, but that has cut pay, that has made workplaces less safe and has pushed our brave public service workers to the limit. Our NHS is creaking at the seams, and it is only our NHS staff that is holding things together. So whether that's my former colleagues who are dispatching ambulances that are having to wait for hours at A&E to be able to hand over patients, or whether it's the police officers supporting victims who are unable to carry on prosecutions because they're waiting so long for their cases to get to court, we're asking our public sector to do more and more with ever less. And at this conference, we have sent a strong signal that we will take this no more. We want properly funded services with the time to care, And Conference, only a Labour government is going to deliver that. Let's get out there and fight for it.
Good morning, Conference. I'm Kerry Poe from Swansea West CLP, first time delegate, first time speaker. So, I come from an NHS family. My mum is a nurse, my wife is an occupational therapist, two roles that pay very well with private providers, but they choose not to work privately because they believe and care about the values and principles that underpin our health service. And I bet this goodwill is shared among many other healthcare workers. But goodwill alone isn't enough to sustain the National Health Service. Now, in Wales, we have a Welsh Labour government. I'd just like to add, I really wanted to cheer for Wales, so thank you. They protect us from a lot of the damage that the Tories have inflicted on the NHS in England, but we do share many of the same issues, whether that be workforce issues or low pay. Now, I know Eluned Morgan is hard at work solving these issues, and our Labour government is currently working hard to establish a national care service. Now, in Wales, we protect our NHS, and we have a great ambition to transform social care. And I'd like to see a Labour government in Westminster share that ambition and protect the NHS all across the country. So please support Composite 15. Thank you.
Julianne McGough from Birkenhead CLP, first-time delegate and speaker. Forgive me for the first time I've spoken, it's actually going to be from a very personal perspective, and it's to support the universal primary and secondary school free meals motion. Thank you. This is a reminder that the motion should extend all the way to sixth form, and I'm going to explain why, hopefully by not crying during the middle of it. Last year, on a part-time contract with a local higher education authority provider, I was significantly below the average wage. On the surface, my son and I would seem to be okay. After all, I'm classed as a middle-class professional, and I've got a doctor in my title, something I'm very proud, working-class background, and achieved my doctorate. However, to reliably feed my son, I relied on food banks, social supermarkets, and kind friends. My son is 17, and he deserves a full belly. He's doing A-levels, and he deserves to be able to make the best of his education. As a parent of a child who needs fed even when that fridge is empty, I felt demoralised and my energy was sucked, and I was running for local election. And it's really hard to do that when you're worried about your kids. My own aspirations became secondary, and my son worried constantly about me being fed. When children go hungry, it sucks the energy and drive of parents. Under the last Labour government, I was also on a low wage at the time, working through a degree, a chance to get an education that I had missed during a Tory 80s government. The tax credits not only ensured my children were fed, but that I could pursue my dreams and my aspirations. I urge conference not only to support the motion, but also to get out there and give working parents today the opportunities I had in the 1990s under the last Labour government.
Thank you, delegates. Some really fantastic speeches there. I'm now going to ask... Oh, sorry. Come on up. Sorry. We've got one more.
Hello, I'm Rachel Palmer. I'm the Disability Officer and Delegate from Wigan CLP, and this is my first conference. I'm struggling a little bit today, so please be patient with me. As our community often says, I have run out of spoons. But I was elected as Disability Officer to represent disabled people and chosen as delegate because I'm one of those difficult women that gets things done. So I'm determined to find one more spoon to be able to speak to you today. I and many other disabled people rely on the NHS and their support to be able to stay alive, let alone thrive. So I ask you to support us and support Composite 15. I get a bit emotional. This time 4 years ago, my mental and physical health meant that I couldn't even complete a form. I couldn't work, I couldn't contribute to my community, couldn't enjoy life. I felt like my physical and mental health were coming at me from both sides. It's thanks to the work of occupational therapists, CBT, physios, doctors and nurses, thanks to our NHS, that I have a career again, I have a life again, and I'm here speaking to you now. But it's been a fight. It's always a fight when you're disabled. Conference, when I was selected to be a delegate, I was excited to take part in debates and decision-making. When discussing accessibility yesterday, I was reminded that there is a ramp there. But this lectern may as well be at the top of a mountain if our disabled community isn't invited to speak at it. It's right that a number of disabled members have been able to speak today and be heard, but disabled people make up 21% of the population, and I believe we've been drastically underrepresented amongst those selected to speak over the past 4 days. Indeed, Composites 6 and 7 specifically mentioned the disabled community and social care users and stated that at all times the community should be the centre of discussions, yet we were not invited to speak on these composites. Several people spoke of well-loved disabled people they know, and while these speeches were wonderful and really moving, there are disabled people here, and we want to speak for ourselves. Conference, please make changes to ensure presented at this lectern, and please support Composite 15. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Delegate. Very well said. So now I'm going to welcome our Shadow Secretary of State for Education, Bridget Phillipson, to the lectern, who will close the debate.
Conference, it is the greatest privilege of all to be here today as Labour's Shadow Education Secretary, heading a fantastic team of Shadow Education Ministers, because nothing is more important to our futures than education. As Keir said yesterday, Labour will run towards the challenges of tomorrow. And if we are to solve the biggest challenges we face, spreading prosperity, tackling climate change, revitalising our communities and building a fairer, greener future, in a world where children born today will live into the next century, where workplaces are changing as never before, where reskilling throughout life is essential, then education must be at the heart of every part of that. And we must build a future where children come first. Conference, this is personal for me. My mum brought me up on her own, and I remember my time at school under the Tories. Classes too big, books too few, money short, and opportunities all too rare. Families like mine, judged, not helped. But I know that I was lucky. I had a loving family who valued education. I went to brilliant state schools with teachers who saw the value and worth in each and every one of us. But life should not come down to luck. That is why I am determined that every child in every school, in every corner of our country, should have the best possible start. So we need a fresh vision of that education, one that looks to the future, not to the past. A curriculum that prizes skills as well as knowledge, that values and nurtures creativity alongside academic success. We need an education system that enables every child to achieve and thrive. And our priorities will define that vision. Conference, that is why we will end tax breaks for private schools. And we will use that money to deliver the most ambitious school improvement programme for a generation, thousands more teachers to help children excel in science and maths, and with access to sport, art, music and drama. Working with brilliant teachers, leaders, support staff and unions, we will drive up standards everywhere. And we will build a modern careers advice and work experience system. So young people right across our schools and colleges leave education ready for work and ready for life. Conference, it is the simple language of priorities. The Tories put the richest first, we put our children first. And we all know these Tories will go on making the wrong choices. Because education under this government is like a school maths problem. If you have 5 education secretaries in 1 year, 3 of them who haven't got a clue what they're doing, 2 of them who want to go back to the 1950s, then what have you got left? I'll tell you, a government that is failing our children. Childcare in crisis. A recovery programme in chaos, school buildings collapsing, and a skills system unfit for today, never mind tomorrow. Universities treated as a political battleground, not a public good. Conference, we will make different choices for children and families across this country, for the world our children will inherit. Today, parents spend more on childcare than on their rent or mortgages. Yet what do we see? Nurseries closing, spiralling costs, mums giving up the jobs they love because they can't drop their kids at school and get to work on time. The Tories denying parents' choices, denying children the best start that they deserve. And yet the evidence could not be clearer. Gaps in learning and development, gaps in opportunities, they open up early. And so our plan must start early too. Today, Conference, I can tell you that the next Labour government will build a modern childcare system. One that supports families from the end of parental leave right through to the end of primary school. One that gives our children the start to their day and the start to their life they deserve. One that gives parents time to succeed and our economy the chance to grow. Conference, as the first step on that road, Today I can announce that we will introduce breakfast clubs for every child in every primary school in England. Because breakfast clubs drive up standards and achievement. They improve behaviour and attendance because it's about the club as well as the breakfast. They enable parents to work. They give mums and dads real choices. And they will help us to build the economy we all need and the society we all want. And we will fund this landmark first step by restoring the higher income tax rate for the very richest. Because, Conference, our children are our priority. And while education starts in childhood, we all know it doesn't end there. The skills system should support people to reskill and upskill. It should support companies to invest in their future and in ours. Conference, it doesn't, it needs to change, and change it we will. That's why our announcement yesterday, building on the work of David Blunkett and the Council of Skills Advisors, is crucial. By reforming the apprenticeships levy, we will give people opportunities to retrain, to upskill and to learn throughout life. And we'll drive a focus on growth right across government by creating Skills England to bring together businesses, unions and training providers to work in partnership, leading a national mission to upskill our country. Conference, education is all about opportunity. For each of us, for all of us, all our life long. But it's about opportunity for our whole country too. The opportunities we all gain from a growing economy, where working parents are supported to succeed and where all our children can achieve and thrive. That is the society Labour wants to build. And we will only build that fairer society of which we all dream, by closing the gap among our children and young people. Conference, education transformed my life. I know it can transform every life. It will be my mission to make sure that it...
Thank you very much, Bridget. That concludes our debate on public services that work from the start. So we're now going to take the votes, and we'll initially take these by shows of hands. So first, we're going to take the references back on public services that work from the Policy Commission annual report. So first, the reference back from Socialist Health Association. All those in favour? All those against? And any abstentions? That's carried. Next, from Labour International CLP, all those in favour? And all those against? And any abstentions? I think that one's carried. Or that one is carried, should I say. The next one is from Beverley and Holderness CLP. All those in favour? All those against? That's carried. Oh no, any abstentions? No, that one's carried. Sutton and Cheam CLP, all those in favour? And all those against? Any abstentions? That one's carried. Next, Dulwich and West Norwood CLP, all those in favour? And all those against? Composite 15 Health, all those in favour? And all those against? And any abstentions? Well, that's unanimous. Composite 16 Early Years and Childcare, all those in favour? And all those against? And any abstentions? And that is also unanimous. And finally, the emergency motion, support for children and families. All those in favour? And all those against? And any abstentions? And Mary Turner would be so proud because that is carried. And now we're going to take the vote on the MPF report. Public Services that Work from the Start. Policy Commission Annual Report. All those in favour? And all those against? And any abstentions? And that is carried. So thank you, Conference. That concludes all the votes for Annual Conference 2022. Fantastic. So now I'm absolutely delighted to invite our guest speaker, Sviatlana to join us. Now, in 2020, Sviatlana bravely stood for election against the president of Belarus, the Putin-backed dictator, Alexander Lukashenko. And since then, she's been forced to flee her home country, but has remained leader of the peaceful resistance against the oppressive regime and has continued to inspire the pro-democracy movement in Belarus. And so it's an absolute privilege to welcome her to speak today. Sviatlana, welcome.
Dear Keir Starmer, dear Conference, I have come here to tell you how I feel at such an important moment in our world's history. I'm happy to be with you here today. I'm happy that I'm not in a torture chamber like so many of my friends. I'm happy that my kid, my husband, is still in prison, and I have no idea how he is. I'm not happy that so many families in Belarus are being harmed, that so many of my people are victims of such horror. And I'm not happy that I can't go back home to my beloved Belarus, which has lost its freedom and independence. Some of you might not know this, but 2 years ago I was an ordinary housewife, raising 2 wonderful children, and I had no interest in politics. The very thought on going on a stage like this was a nightmare for me. Then my husband, Sergei Tsikhanouskaya, stood up against the brutal dictator who has dominated our country for 27 years. Sergei said, "I will challenge the president." The dictator responded, "No, you will not." And Sergei was locked up. My children, whom I now only see at weekends, ask me when their dad will come home. And I still don't know how to explain that their dad has been sentenced to 18 years in prison. To support my husband, I decided to put my name on the ballot for president. Surprisingly, the dictator accepted my candidacy. He let me stand as a joke. "No one will never vote for a woman," he said. But guess what? I won. democracy won. Obviously, the dictator refused to accept the result, and hundreds of thousands took to the streets. The next morning, people of the regime called me up and said that I had lost. They said if I didn't leave the country immediately, I would never see my children again. They thought that they would just get rid of me and the movement for freedom would die. Instead, every week, for months and months, more and more people took to the streets. Under the pressure of such massive protests, the dictatorship nearly did collapse. But Putin came in to save him. They drowned the protests in violence and terror. As I am speaking today, 1,350 political prisoners are behind bars, and this number is growing every day. More than 50,000 people have been detained, many tortured by KGB. You know, I had thousands of moments when I was ready to give up, to stop my fight, but every morning I wake up and keep fighting. I don't know when our loved ones will be free, but I know that every day we are one step closer to that moment. And one of those who inspires me to continue fighting is Andrei Alexandrov. He's a journalist. For doing his job, he was sentenced to many years of prison. He was accused of high treason. Andrei is also a big fan of Liverpool Football Club. You know, people who shared a cell with him have told me that every day Andrei sings, "You will never walk alone." In his letters from prison, he puts these lines from Liverpool's anthem: walk on with hope in your heart, and you will never walk alone. You will never walk alone. And you never, on our path to freedom and democracy, we never walked alone. You can't even imagine how much support we have received from all over the world. After events in Belarus in 2020 and in Ukraine in February 2022, the world woke up to what tyranny really means and understood why it has to be defeated. The world now understands that human rights and the defense of freedom is not a local issue, and that true democracies must stand together to defend each other. Our fates are intertwined. A threat to democracy in one country is a threat to the whole world. Without victory in Ukraine, a free Belarus is impossible. And without a free Belarus, there can be no lasting peace in Europe. You know, when you hear the word Belarus, you might think of a country which helps Putin in this war. But I think about brave partisans who stop Russian military equipment. I think about Belarusian military volunteers who are fighting in Ukraine. They understand that victory in Ukraine will lead to lasting change in Belarus. The most dangerous moment in our history, but there is hope. At this very moment, everything we stand for, everything we believe in, can be destroyed. Democracy, freedom, justice. On the other hand, this moment gives Belarus the opportunity to turn the tide and make our country part of the European family. But it must be the result of coordinated action. Putin must be defeated. Putin must be defeated. Putin will be defeated. Lukashenko must be defeated. Lukashenko will be defeated. You know, today I didn't come here to lecture you. I came here today to thank you. Because Britain understands our fight. The very first people expelled by the regime were 2 female British diplomats. It was the UK who immediately reacted to the political crisis in Belarus. It has introduced and tightened sanctions on the regime. It was the UK who immediately launched the program of assistance to media, civil society, and supported us in the OSCE and United Nations, in the G7 and the Council of Europe. British parliamentarians adopted the cause of political prisoners, including Lord George Fawkes and Sir Tony Lloyd, the chairperson of all-party parliamentary group for Belarus. I'm aware that Tony is unable to be here today, and I send him my best wishes on behalf of Free Belarus. And of course, I must mention the UK's role in supporting the fight of Ukraine. It has become an example and inspiration to many others. UK must continue to lead the global fight against tyranny and oppression. People all over the world look to you for your strength. We are together on the front line in the fight for democracy. And let me assure you, we will not stop. Belarusians will not stop until all political prisoners are released, until every Russian soldier leaves our country, until we hold trials for crimes against humanity, until we get our country back. I will never rest until my children, all children, can live in a country free from fear, tyranny, and war. I came here to say that we need you, and we need each other. This is not an easy fight, but thanks to you, thanks to your passion, thanks to your continued support, I know that we will win.
Thank you so much, Sviatlana. There are no words, really. That was just amazing. So thank you. It's almost the end of conference, but we've got one final speaker, and we're going to end the conference how we started it, with me calling Angela Rayner.
Thank you, Conference, and wow, thank you, Sviatlana. What a speech. And the sacrifice that Sviatlana has made for her country, she sets an example to us all. A woman, a mother, who has led a movement not for personal ambition, but to free her country and her people. And I say, the Labour Party stands with you, and a Labour government would do too. Now, Conference, it's a great honour to make the closing speech before our traditional anthems, to close the week just as John Prescott did back in the day, although I think I look better in a dress. I hope we're doing proud today. I love the traditions of our movement, from the Durham Miners' Gala to the Tolpuddle Martyrs Festival. But Conference, there's one part of our history that I will never celebrate, and that's losing elections. Just think how it will feel meeting here in this hall in a few years' time after a term of a Labour government back in power. Now, Conference, this is the Labour Party, so I've no doubt that we'll also be discussing how further we'd like to go once we've debated the CAC report for around 20 minutes. But, Conference, what I will say is when the Tories deliver 1% of what they promise, they talk endlessly about that 1%, and we never hear about the list of broken promises. When we deliver 99% of what we promise, we talk endlessly about the 1% we didn't instead. We set a high bar, but just think about the historic Labour governments and their legacy. They didn't please all of our movement all of the time, including me, but those Labour governments made history. The NHS, social security, the welfare state, council housing, modern higher education, the open university, decriminalising homosexuality, outlawing racial discrimination, introducing equal pay, the national minimum wage, Sure Start, devolution, the Good Friday Agreement, civil partnerships, Equal Pay Act, the Human Rights Act and the world's first Climate Change Act. And Conference, if we're not proud of ourselves, don't expect anyone else to do it for us. And just think what that future party conference could have to celebrate. We've shown this week how different we'll be, not just in our vision, but with our plan for Britain. Starting with the biggest challenge facing not just our country, but the world. We'll tackle the climate crisis head-on. We will protect our people and our planet, and we will pull out all the stops to build a fairer and greener Britain. As Keir set out yesterday, through our Green Prosperity Plan, we will unleash a green industrial revolution by reaching 100% clean power by 2030. We will save £93 billion off energy bills. And through Great British Energy, we will give British power right back to the British people. Now, conference, I said on Sunday that a moment of choice is upon us. A moment to show the country that we are ready to govern. Well, conference, I know I'm a bit biased, but boy, do I think that we've shown that. Now, it isn't just that we have better policies, although we do. It isn't just that we will be more competent, although we will. It's that our values differ fundamentally, and our policies are not better despite our values, but because of them. Labour values, the country's values too. Yet too often, when it comes to elections, people feel that they have a choice of heart versus head, values or competence. I say to those watching at home, this week, we have shown it's a choice you will never have to make again. And this past week, the Tories have shown it too. The Conservative Party are no longer pretending to be competent and stable. Today's Tories will plunge us into chaos in pursuit of their dogma, divide the country to rule it, and regards rules as for you and not for them. I mean, they said tough on crime. They brought crime to number 10. Defenders of the free market, the market's in free fall. England's green and pleasant land, frack it. From the party of stability to causing earthquakes, from the party of business to a slapdown from the IMF, from the party of serious government to the party of parties. Liz Truss has even market now. Now, you'd think that snouts in the trough was one of the things that they could manage. When interest rates were low and borrowing was cheap, they sacrificed public services for austerity. Now they're borrowing just as interest rates are soaring. To think this was the party that claimed they were for sound money. That's what one high-flying new Tory MP certainly thought back in 2012. He wrote a pamphlet demanding a balanced budget every year. He said, fiscal prudence is the very least we should expect from a Chancellor. And if they failed, they should face a 20% pay cut. I tell you what, that Tory MP must be absolutely furious with the new Chancellor, except he is the new Tory Chancellor. And you know what? I've got a funny feeling he won't be taking that pay cut either. Because you see, pay cuts are for other people. He won't even let the budget watchdog tell him just how much of our money he is handing over to the super rich. They used to say the Tories knew the value of nothing but the cost of everything. Now they don't even know that. Now, the next election won't be a choice between a strong economy or a fair society. We don't have to choose one or the other, because you can't have one without the other. An unequal economy is an inefficient one. It's perhaps the starkest difference between us and the Tories. Never again can we let them pretend that they are the patriotic party. I love my country. That's why I want so much better for it. But the Tories now think our biggest economic problem is you, the working people of Britain. And while they think you are the country's greatest weakness, we know that you are our greatest strength. And that's why Rachel and I will make the minimum wage a real living wage. Because we are not just the party of higher growth, but of higher wages too. Now, we know what the Tories think. The new Prime Minister and her Chancellor have said it out loud. The problem is that British workers are idlers, not grafters. The irony from this lot. Liz Truss says she doesn't like handouts, then handed £150 billion to the energy giants. They believe in handouts, all right. And it's the same with their other top priority, unlimited bankers' bonuses. It's the same old Tory ideology. You incentivise the richest by giving them more money, and you incentivise the rest of us by taking it away. Conference, it hasn't worked before, and it won't wash now. Now, I know they'd rather forget it, but we're now in 12 years into Tory government, even if we are on our fourth Prime Minister. And where are they now? David Cameron, the privatised Prime Minister sold to Greensill. What was his greatest achievement? Fooling the Lib Dems. Not exactly a high bar. If you care about power for power's sake and have no principles, no policies and no plan, you end up with a pointless premiership remembered only as a pub quiz answer. And then, of course, we had Theresa May. I remember her telling us that if you were a citizen of the world, you were a citizen of nowhere. If only we'd known about their green cards and tax loopholes. Their politicians becoming like their donors, residents of everywhere, taxpayers of nowhere. And then there's Boris Johnson. I do owe him one apology. I said he couldn't organise a booze up in a brewery. Turns out he could organise a booze up pretty much anywhere. Just a shame he couldn't organise anything else. Now, we're a party with a serious plan. He had a plan for a serious party. I'll miss one thing, though. As inflation ran out of control, at least his jokes were one thing that got cheaper every week. But the real problem wasn't that his jokes were so cheap, it was that his mistakes were so expensive. He ended his time claiming he was forced from office by the deep state. The only deep state that forced him from office was the one he left our country in. Sorry, Conference, I had to use all of my Boris lines now while he's still remembered and while everyone knows who he is, before he becomes a footnote in the failure of the history books. Well, Conference, at least that's what the new Prime Minister must be hoping for, because he'll be sat on the back benches, plotting his comeback with a glint in his eye, thinking, I wasn't so bad after all, was I? What a sorry state of affairs. And what does Liz Truss have to say after a decade in government? Apparently, they were wrong all along. She's now asking for 7 years to fix it, yet offering us even more of the ideology that caused the problems in the first place. She doesn't just think that we're lazy, she must think that we're stupid as well. And that brings me to this new government, openly chosen for loyalty, not ability, a ministry of all the talentless. Frankly, Conference, when I looked at the benches opposite last week, I thought the clowns had escaped the circus. Not so much flying circus, a lying circus. Now, maybe I'm being unfair. My new opposite number, her first crisis in our NHS, the spread of a new and dangerous contagion. Not the Omicron variant, the Oxford comma. Now that's a comma before the word "and," in case you were wondering. Something like this sentence: GPs are overwhelmed, ambulances not turning up, beds are full, waiting times are rocketing, the NHS is starved of investment, and it's all the fault of the Tory decisions. Now, it'll take a Labour government to put that right. So here's another sentence that Therese Coffey won't like. A Labour government will double the number of district nurses, train 5,000 new health visitors, create 10,000 nursing places, double the number of medical students, and we will pay for it by reversing your handouts to the wealthiest few. Now, I like every dot and comma of that policy conference. And what a contrast to the government you've seen this week. Yesterday, the country saw the Keir that I know and see every day, announcing 100% clean power by 2030, driven by a British energy company owned by the British people for the British people. He showed the true, real leadership this country needs. And on Monday, Rachel showed how Labour would govern with competence, class and care, with her as the UK's first ever female Chancellor. Setting out our National Wealth Fund to give the British public a share of the wealth that they create, and a genuine living wage that matches the cost of living. And I just want to thank my own front bench team, Rachel, Justin, Imran and Flo and Fleur, for all that they have done. We have set out our 5-point plan for national procurement to tackle waste, sleaze and lies and unleash the power of public spending. Our Fair Work standard to raise working conditions across the economy, alongside our New Deal for working people. And we haven't stopped there. Our whole shadow cabinet has shown we are a team with a plan. 70% home ownership, our renters' charter, a clamp down on buy-to-let, council housing, council housing, council housing. The Hillsborough Law, a domestic abuse register and a new football regulator, sewerage sanctions, job centre reform and a transformational industrial strategy, insulation, innovation, inspiration, all in one. $13,000 more police officers to keep our communities safe. New Navy ships built by unionised workers in British shipyards. Closing the tax break for private schools to fund education for all. Free school breakfasts for children. New bus services in public hands. And as contracts expire, restoring public ownership of the railways. Conference, our shadow cabinet has shown what a Labour government will be. Radical, responsible, realistic. But delivering this message would be absolutely impossible without all of you. Our brilliant activists who campaign through the wind and the rain, and that's just outside this building. If you ever needed proof that an onshore wind farm can deliver, get outside the Pullman. Now, I have too many people to thank, but I want to mention our brilliant chair, Alice Perry, standing down from the NEC. And Diana Holland, who is stepping down as party treasurer after 12 years. We all owe her a debt of gratitude. We could probably do with her also in the Chancellor's office as well. And finally, a thank you to Liverpool for hosting our conference. Now, while the Tories would be ashamed to show their face here, you've shown us the warmth and the pride that defines this city. Conference this week, we have shown how together we will transform this country, and the depth and the talent across our whole party. And we've come together to honour our history as only Labour can. Be in no doubt, the times ahead are going to be tough. But now let's rise to the moment and deliver for working people of Britain. Let's build a fairer, greener future with a Labour government in power once again. Thank you.
Angela Rayner, you're such a legend. So thank you so much. We're almost at the end of the closing formalities, but at the beginning of conference, oh, by the way, if you're trying to leave, the exits are that way because the exhibition hall's closed. So at the beginning of conference, I said that this had been the biggest exhibition for 15 years, and we've had the most fringe events. And I think we can add one more list of achievements in having like one of the most positive, unified conferences in many, many years. We don't know when the general election will come, but it's very clear we're ready for it. Yeah, and thank you. One more thing as well. I'd love to have a round of applause for the venue, the security staff, the cleaners, everyone who's done such a great job here in Liverpool. I also want to say a huge thank you to all the Labour Party staff. So much work has gone into getting us here, not just this conference, but where we are now. And I want to say a very special thank you to the person someone described as the anonymous man next to me, Fraser. You're amazing. Thank you so much. And the speakers' desk are amazing as well. So thank you to all of you. And a big thank you to you, to everyone who's attended conference. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honour to chair. So thank you for being brilliant. And now, as with tradition, we're going to end with some singing. So I'm going to welcome Anne-Marie Newton, who's a soprano, singing tutor and choral director based in Liverpool, and Stephen Manning is Director of Music at Liverpool's Anglican Cathedral. And they're going to lead us in a rendition of The Red Flag and Jerusalem.
of the teens at 25, spend my days